Mi nombre es Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez, alias El Cholo, originario de Guadalajara, Jalisco.
After betraying El Mencho, Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, El Cholo was captured, tortured, forced to confess on camera, and dumped on a park bench with knives, pinning a warning to his body. And when Marcos Hernandez, El Colombiano, exposed cartel theft, El Cholo had him killed, which ignited a cartel war. Here is the tragic fate of CJNG members who betrayed El Mencho. Heriberto Acevedo Cárdenas, El Gringo. In the world of the CJNG, Heriberto Acevedo Cárdenas was the kind of man who made even hardened sicarios uneasy. Known by his alias El Gringo, a nickname earned on account of his fair complexion, as well as El Güero, Acevedo did not simply enforce the cartel's will. He redefined what enforcement meant. He joined the CJNG around 2011, initially serving as a personal bodyguard for Abundio Mendoza Gaitan, one of the organization's high-ranking members, but it did not take long for him to climb the ranks, eventually becoming the jefe de plaza, the local boss, for the entire Región Valles area in Jalisco, overseeing territories including Zacoalco de Torres, Tlajomulco de Zúñiga, Cocula, and Tapalpa. What set Acevedo apart from the rest of the CJNG's vast army of killers was something that can only be described as a signature of pure terror. According to authorities, Acevedo pioneered the use of dynamite as an execution method, strapping live explosives to the bodies of his victims while they were still breathing, and then detonating them. Videos recovered from his cell phone and the phones of his associates after his death confirmed this horrifying practice. In one recording, an adult male, bloodied and bound with duct tape, had an explosive device strapped to his chest before it was detonated in a forested area. The perpetrators could be heard celebrating with gunfire afterward. Acevedo was linked to at least 9 homicides and orchestrated a number of high-profile attacks, including the May 2014 ambush that killed 4 Mexican army soldiers in Huachinango and the execution of 2 police investigators in Tlajomulco. He was also implicated in fuel theft, synthetic drug distribution, and enforced disappearances. His reign of terror came to an abrupt end on March 23, 2015, on the free highway near Zacoalco de Torres. Fleeing from officers of the Fuerza Única Jalisco, his vehicle overturned. Rather than surrender, Acevedo and 3 associates opened fire and even hurled a grenade at police. All 4 were killed in the ensuing gunfight. It was only after his death, when authorities sifted through the contents of his devices, that the full extent of his atrocities became known. But the story did not end there. The CJNG's retaliation for El Gringo's death was swift, devastating, and deeply calculated. Within days, on April 6, 2015, CJNG gunmen ambushed a police convoy in San Sebastián del Oeste, killing 15 officers and injuring 5, with no reported cartel losses. Between March 19 and April 7 of that year, the CJNG was responsible for at least 21 police killings. In death, Acevedo proved just as dangerous as he had been in life. Marcos Hernandez, El Colombiano. Before the CJNG tore itself apart, before the formation of rival cartels and the public executions and the blood-soaked narcomantas, there was a single murder that set the entire chain of events into motion. That murder was the killing of Marcos Hernandez, a Colombian national who went by aliases including El Colombiano, El Carton, and El Smith. Hernandez was not a gunman or a plaza boss. He was something far more valuable to El Mencho. He was the cartel's financial operator, the man who oversaw money laundering, managed the flow of funds, and kept the CJNG's vast economic machinery running smoothly. Hernandez had integrated himself deeply into the upper echelons of the CJNG, despite his foreign origins. He was a trusted figure, and crucially, he had El Mencho's ear, and it was this access that would prove fatal, not for Hernandez alone, but for the entire structure of the cartel, because at some point, Hernandez reportedly became aware that one of the CJNG's most powerful members, Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, known as El Cholo, had been stealing from the organization. Hernandez did what any loyal operator would do. He reported the thefts directly to El Mencho. The consequences of that report were catastrophic. El Cholo, unwilling to face El Mencho's judgment, allegedly ordered Hernandez's assassination. Sources differ on the exact date and location. Some place it in March 2017 during a firefight in a Puerto Vallarta Walmart parking lot, while others cite August 2017 in Zapopan, where Hernandez was gunned down in his red BMW i8. Regardless of the specifics, the outcome was the same: the murder of a key CJNG financial operator by one of the cartel's own top lieutenants. El Mencho's response to the killing of his trusted financial operator was precisely what one would expect from a man who had built his empire on the principle that disloyalty was punishable by death. He immediately ordered El Cholo's assassination, but the hit failed, and in failing, it accomplished the opposite of its intended purpose. It did not silence the rebellion, but instead gave it a reason to exist. This single act of violence set off a chain reaction that would fracture the CJNG, birth the Nueva Plaza cartel, and unleash years of bloodshed across western Mexico. In ordering the death of El Colombiano, El Cholo didn't merely eliminate a rival, he lit the fuse on a powder keg that would consume dozens of lives, including, eventually and inevitably, his own. Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez, El Cholo.
Mi nombre es Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez, alias El Cholo, originario de Guadalajara, Jalisco.
If the murder of Marcos Hernandez was the spark, then Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez, El Cholo, was the inferno that followed. Once described as El Mencho's right-hand man, his compadre, his chief of sicarios, El Cholo enjoyed a position of extraordinary trust within the CJNG. He oversaw hit squads and enforced territorial control across the Guadalajara metropolitan area, a region of critical strategic importance to the cartel's drug trafficking operations. His loyalty to El Mencho appeared absolute, until it wasn't. When El Mencho learned of El Colombiano's murder at El Cholo's hands, he did what anyone who knew him would have expected. He ordered El Cholo's execution. But the assassination attempt failed, not once, but at least twice in 2017 alone. Realizing that reconciliation was impossible, El Cholo defected entirely. He aligned himself with Eric Valencia Salazar, known as L85, himself a disillusioned CJNG co-founder, and together they formed the Nueva Plaza cartel. With financial and operational backing from the Sinaloa cartel, the group declared war on the very organization El Cholo had once helped build. The violence that followed was staggering. In the first quarter of 2018 alone, Jalisco recorded 415 homicide investigations. El Cholo's strategy was to deliberately heat up the plazas, orchestrating mass graves, high-profile attacks, and even a grenade assault on the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara, all designed to attract federal attention and pressure against the CJNG. But El Mencho's patience was a terrifying thing, and his reach was longer than anyone imagined. On March 18, 2021, CJNG forces captured El Cholo. What followed was among the most horrifying episodes in the history of Mexico's drug war. A video surfaced showing a handcuffed El Cholo, his face disfigured from torture, surrounded by 6 masked, heavily armed sicarios. In the footage, he confessed to his crimes, the mass graves, the consulate grenade attack, the Tonalá massacre, and spoke what would be his final public words, advising his followers to abandon the fight and go home to their families. It was the kind of scene that, once watched, could never be unwatched. The autopsy told a story almost too gruesome to recount. Eyes gouged, 8 toes amputated, both tibias fractured, ribs broken, tongue extracted, and burns from electric pincers. Death came from 3 gunshots to the head. His body, wrapped in black plastic like a mannequin, was dumped on a park bench in Tlaquepaque's Jardín Hidalgo, a tourist area near Mariachi Plazas, with kitchen knives pinning signs to his torso that read, "The Traitor, El Cholo." Eric Valencia Salazar, L85. There are very few people in the world who can say they helped build the CJNG from the ground up. Eric Valencia Salazar is one of them. Known as L85, Valencia Salazar was a co-founder of the cartel, instrumental in its transformation from a fractured Milenio cartel splinter group into the global powerhouse it became. Alongside El Mencho, he led Los Matazetas, a paramilitary unit responsible for attacks that announced the CJNG's arrival on the national stage, including the infamous 2011 Boca del Rio massacre, where 35 bodies were dumped beneath an overpass. But the very foundation that L85 helped lay would eventually crack beneath him. His arrest on March 9, 2012 in Zapopan sparked immediate chaos. CJNG operatives hijacked and torched 25 vehicles, blocking roads in 16 locations across Jalisco and Michoacán. Speculation immediately arose that El Mencho himself had tipped off authorities to eliminate a rival for power. Whether or not that was true, the suspicion poisoned their relationship beyond repair. Released in December 2017 due to procedural violations in his case, L85 emerged into a cartel that had changed dramatically during his incarceration. When El Mencho ordered the failed assassination of El Cholo that same year, L85 saw his opening. He joined El Cholo's defection, becoming a co-leader of the Nueva Plaza cartel. The move represented perhaps the most significant internal fracture in the CJNG's history, a co-founder turning against the organization he had helped create. After El Cholo's execution in 2021, L85 assumed leadership of the weakened Nueva Plaza cartel, but his time at the top was short-lived. On September 4, 2022, He was arrested in Tapalpa with associates, 1,000 fentanyl pills, 750 grams of methamphetamine, and weapons. Despite filing multiple legal appeals to block extradition, he was handed over to U.S. authorities on February 27, 2025, as part of a wave of 29 cartel extraditions. As of August 2025, he was reportedly negotiating a guilty plea, potentially offering intelligence on the inner workings of the very cartel he helped create. His tragic fate was not a bullet or a blade, but the slow, grinding unraveling of everything he had spent a lifetime building. From co-founder to fugitive, from cartel king to federal prisoner, L85's journey ended not in a blaze of glory or a dramatic last stand, but in the sterile corridors of an American courtroom, a fate that, for a man who once commanded armies, may have been the cruelest punishment of all. Emilio Alejandro Pulido Saldaña, El Tiburon. Of all the men who helped birth the CJNG into existence, perhaps none had their fall driven so purely by fear as Emilio Alejandro Pulido Saldaña, the man they called El Tiburon, the shark. Like L85 and El Mencho himself, Pulido Saldaña was recognized as one of the original co-founders of the CJNG. Established around 2009 in Guadalajara, following the violent splintering of the Milenio cartel, his nickname evoked a predatory image that suited his reputed role in the cartel's enforcement and operational arms during its earliest, most volatile years, but the same internal fractures that sent L85 and El Cholo spiraling away from El Mencho caught Pulido Saldaña in their gravity as well. When the infighting peaked in 2017 and El Mencho's failed assassination attempt on El Cholo ignited a full-scale schism, El Tiburon threw his lot in with the defectors. He joined El Cholo and L85 in forming the Nueva Plaza cartel, aligning himself against the very organization he had helped establish. Some accounts suggest he also forged broader alliances with factions of the Sinaloa cartel, particularly those under Ismael El Mayo Zambada, further intensifying the web of rivalries. Within the Nueva Plaza structure, Pulido Saldaña reportedly served as second in command under El Cholo, helping to coordinate operations and violent confrontations against the CJNG across Jalisco and Colima. But whatever ambitions he harbored were shattered on March 18, 2021, the day the CJNG captured, tortured, and executed El Cholo in the most public and gruesome fashion imaginable. The message was unmistakable. El Cholo's plastic-wrapped body, dumped on a park bench with knives pinning signs to his torso, was not simply the end of one man's story. It was a direct, visceral warning aimed squarely at everyone who had followed him, and Pulido Saldaña understood that warning perfectly. According to multiple reports, El Tiburon surrendered to Mexican authorities shortly after El Cholo's murder, driven by an overwhelming fear that he would be next. It was a remarkable turn of events, a co-founder of one of the most powerful cartels in history, a man who had helped wage war across western Mexico, walking into the arms of law enforcement not because he was cornered, but because the alternative was worse. Conflicting accounts exist regarding the details of this surrender, with some media outlets labeling the reports as false, but the prevailing narrative remains consistent. El Tiburon chose prison over the fate that had befallen his comrade. No confirmed updates on his status have emerged since 2021, suggesting he remains in custody, alive perhaps, but stripped of everything that once defined him. José Bernabé Brizuela Meraz, La Vaca. José Bernabé Brizuela Meraz, known by aliases including La Vaca, the cow, La Bestia, the beast, and El Animal, represented a different kind of betrayal, one rooted not in a power struggle among co-founders, but in the strange, volatile realm of cartel rumor and speculation. Born on October 21, 1982, in the port city of Lázaro Cárdenas, Michoacán, Brizuela Meraz began his criminal career with ties to the Arellano Felix cartel before migrating to the CJNG, where he rose to become a Plaza lieutenant in the strategically vital port of Manzanillo, Colima. In October 2021, the U.S. government formally identified him as a CJNG Plaza lieutenant, highlighting his role in overseeing drug trafficking routes through one of Mexico's most important Pacific ports. What made Brizuela Meraz's defection unique was the justification he offered. In early 2022, amid swirling and persistent rumors that El Mencho had suffered a fatal cardiac arrest, rumors that Mexican authorities consistently denied, narcomantas began began appearing across Colima proclaiming the CJNG cartel leader's death. These banners were attributed to the Mezcales group, a faction that Brizuela Miraz is believed to have led. The message was clear. Without El Mencho, there was no CJNG worth serving. The Mezcales, also calling themselves the Cartel Independiente de Colima, declared war on their former allies. They deployed narco-mantas accusing the CJNG of internal betrayals and even claimed to have refused a CJNG order to assassinate Colima Governor Indira Vizcaíno Silva. The resulting violence was devastating. A prison riot on January 25, 2022, at Colima's Cerrizo facility left 9 dead. In the following month alone, over 60 homicides were recorded, with the state averaging 4 murders per day by April 2022. Brizuela Miraz's independence proved short-lived. On August 18, 2022, he was arrested in Mexico City's Miguel Hidalgo borough. Authorities seized 7 rifles and over 3,400 cartridges. In Colima, the response was immediate. Supporters set at least 14 vehicles ablaze and erected blockades across the state. On September 1, 2022, a federal judge issued a formal imprisonment order, and Brizuela Miraz was transferred to the high-security Altiplano prison. His sister, Blanca Elizabeth La Paloma Brizuela Miraz, reportedly assumed leadership of the group afterward, continuing the campaign of terror in Colima with arson, drive-by shootings, and indiscriminate killings. As of 2026, Brizuela Miraz is believed to remain incarcerated, his defection having accomplished little beyond unleashing chaos and ensuring his own downfall. Miguel Ángel Fernández Valencia, LM2. Some men are born into the cartel world. Miguel Ángel Fernández Valencia, known as LM2s, was one of them. Born around 1981 in La Peña, Colorado, a small rural town in the municipality of La Huacana, Michoacán, Fernández grew up as one of 14 siblings in a region where the line between legitimate agriculture and illicit drug cultivation had been blurred for decades. His family belonged to the influential Valencia clan, which had transitioned from avocado farming to criminal enterprises in the mid-20th century, capitalizing on Michoacán's proximity to Pacific smuggling ports. As a young man, Fernández migrated illegally to the United States, living in California, Utah, and Idaho while trafficking drugs across the border. In May 2006, he was arrested in Bellevue, Idaho during a traffic stop in which he attempted to flee by ramming a police MAR vehicle. Authorities found over 4 ounces of crystal methamphetamine in his possession, and he was sentenced to federal prison until late 2014. While incarcerated, he learned to play guitar, drawing inspiration from Bob Marley and Santana, and became a talented norteño singer. He had 4 sons, and once expressed a personal dream of them living safely in Mexico without the need for armed protection. Upon deportation, Fernández rapidly ascended within the CJNG, leveraging his family connections to El Mencho, to whom he was related by marriage. He became a key regional commander in Michoacán's Tierra Caliente, leading the Fuerzas Especiales Mencho, a specialized enforcement unit based in Aguililla, El Mencho's hometown. Under his command were sicarios armed with FN SCAR rifles, Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifles, grenade launchers, and improvised armored vehicles. He was accused of orchestrating the October 2019 ambush on a Michoacán state police convoy that killed 14 officers and injured 9. Rumors surfaced in late 2019 that Fernández had defected to La Nueva Familia Michoacana, a rival group. Though these claims were later disputed, they cast a shadow over his loyalty. In a rare interview with Vice in March 2021, he defended the CJNG, accusing state authorities of corruption and supporting their rivals. His end came on January 29, 2022, 2 days before his 41st birthday, when Mexican Army and National Guard forces raided El Aguaje. Fernández mobilized supporters by ringing church bells, ordering sicarios to plant landmines and drop drone bombs. During the firefight near Loma Blanca's cemetery, he was shot in the chest and fled but collapsed. His decomposing body was found on February 6, 2022, in a field in El Casangüe, identified by his clothing, gold-capped teeth, bracelets, and scars. His bodyguards were later executed by the CJNG for failing to protect him, and his wife was relocated. In the end, LM2's fate was not execution by a rival, but an anonymous death in a field, his body decomposing for a week before anyone found it. Audias Flores Silva, El Jardinero. Not every man who finds himself on the wrong side of El Mencho's legacy ends up dead or behind bars. Some become something arguably more dangerous. They become the next in line. Audias Flores Silva, known as El Jardinero, the gardener, represents a case that is still unfolding, a fate that has not yet been sealed, but one that carries all the hallmarks of a tragic trajectory and progress. Born on November 19, 1980, In Huetamo, Michoacán, Flores Silva entered the criminal world in the early 2000s and joined the CJNG during its formative expansion phase, starting as a security operative protecting the cartel's top leadership. His nickname derives from his surname Flores, Spanish for flowers, evoking the image of a man who cultivates and tends to illicit operations the way a gardener tends to soil. And indeed, Flores Silva cultivated the CJNG's dominance with remarkable efficiency. By 2021, he controlled operations across Jalisco, Michoacán, Nayarit, Zacatecas, and Guerrero, managing clandestine methamphetamine and fentanyl laboratories and using a private fleet of airplanes and tractor trailers to move drugs from Central America to the U.S. border. He is also credited with brokering a strategic alliance between the CJNG and the Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel. His rap sheet is extensive. He served 5 years in a U.S. prison in the early 2000s for narcotics trafficking. Arrested again in Mexico in 2016, he was released through legal appeals before a 40-year sentence was imposed, which he evaded by going on the run. The United States designated him under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act in 2021 and labeled him a specially designated global terrorist in 2025. The State Department offers a $5 million reward for information leading to his arrest. Following El Mencho's death in February 2026, Flores Silva emerged as one of the leading contenders for control of the CJNG, a position that, in the world of Mexican cartels, is less a crown and more a target painted on one's back. He competes with figures like Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, El Doble R, and Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, El 03, El Mencho's own stepson, for the throne. Narco corridos like El Sucesor by Gerardo Diaz already position him as the heir apparent, blending folklore with reality in the way that only Mexico's narco culture can. His fate remains unwritten, but if history is any guide, the seat at the top of the CJNG is the most dangerous chair in Mexico, and El Jardinero is walking straight toward it. Hugo Cesar Macias Ureña, El Tuli. Hugo Cesar Macias Ureña, known as El Tuli or El Tulipan, was not a man who sought the spotlight. He was a man who operated in the shadows, handling the logistics, the finances, the recruitment, the weapons training, the invisible gears that kept the CJNG machine turning. Born in Tepeque, a locality in Tepalcatepec, Michoacán, a region steeped in organized crime, Macias Ureña rose through the cartel's ranks not through family connections, but through what narco corridos describe as a natural affinity for danger. Songs by groups like Ruta 200, Norteño Banda, and Legion LB paint him as a man who was born for action and a lover of danger, a loyal soldier who endured torture and pressure without ever betraying his superiors. Within the CJNG, Macias Ureña served as part of the second-tier operational leadership, not in the inner financial core, but indispensable to the operational arm. He commanded mobile armed cells, supervised weapons training, and managed territorial plazas across Jalisco's southern coast. Intelligence from the Guacamaya military leaks identified him as L5, or Julio, with direct access to El Mencho's central command. Seized ledgers later revealed he managed operational expenses as large as 300,000 pesos in a single month. His moment of greatest visibility, and his undoing, came on February 22, 2026, the same day El Mencho was killed in a military operation in Tapalpa, Jalisco. Though he had not been formally designated as successor, Macias Ureña immediately assumed operational control of the CJNG's response. What followed was a coordinated wave of retaliatory violence across multiple states: highway blockades, vehicle arsons, and assaults on military barracks and government buildings. Most chillingly, he reportedly offered bounties of 20,000 pesos, roughly $150, for every soldier killed. The resulting violence claimed the lives of 25 National Guard members and 3 civilians. Military intelligence tracked him to El Grullo, Jalisco, where he was orchestrating the chaos. Cornered by an aeromobile unit from the paratrooper rifle brigade, Macias Ureña attempted to flee in a vehicle while firing at troops. He was killed in the confrontation. Authorities seized a long gun, a handgun, 7.2 million pesos, 965,000 US dollars, ammunition, and magazines from the scene. In the narco corridos, he was immortalized as a man who would give his life for his boss. On February 22, 2026, that is precisely what he did. Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, El Sapo. The final name on this list belongs to a man whose story is still shrouded in conflicting reports and unverified intelligence. Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, known as El Sapo, the Toad. Mendoza Gaitan was a high-level CJNG operative who specialized in logistics and, critically, in the sourcing of chemical precursors, the raw materials that fed the cartel's methamphetamine and fentanyl production apparatus. His expertise in supply chain management made him a quietly essential figure in the organization, even if his name never carried the same weight as those of the gunmen and plaza bosses who dominated the headlines. El Sapo's significance grew in the aftermath of El Mencho's prolonged absence from public view, years in which health rumors swirled and the cartel's internal dynamics shifted. As the CJNG navigated its way through succession planning, Mendoza Gaitan was identified by analysts as one of several potential contenders for influence within the post-Mencho power structure, though his strengths lay more in operations than in the kind of violent charisma that typically defines cartel leadership. His fate, like much in the world of the CJNG, remains a subject of debate. Intelligence reports from February 2026 suggest that Mendoza Gaitan may have been killed during the same military operation in Tapalpa, Jalisco, that took the life of El Mencho himself. If these reports are accurate, then El Sapo's story ended not with a betrayal's consequences catching up to him, but with the same operation that decapitated the very cartel he served. Some analysts have speculated that internal distrust, the suspicion that someone within the CJNG's inner circle may have facilitated the military's ability to locate El Mencho, could implicate figures like Mendoza Gaitan, though no concrete evidence supports this theory. What is known is that the operation that killed El Mencho on February 22, 2026, was reportedly triggered by surveillance of a romantic partner, not a cartel member, but someone close enough to betray his location. The broader question of whether internal betrayal contributed to the operation remains unanswered. In the aftermath, the CJNG's leadership structure fractured, with figures like El Jardinero, El Doble R, and El 03 each vying for control. El Sapo, if he survived, would face the same impossible choice that every CJNG lieutenant now confronts: fight for power in a crumbling empire, or disappear before the empire crumbles on top of you. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.